When we were starting earlier, Bob was fussing because we were out here in this weather, and we had this beautiful building sanctuary, and we'd taken the roof off the wall, off the building, and moved out in the parking lot. He had a comfortable pew inside that he could just be sitting in without any kind of wind. And we would miss out the opportunity to be out here in this wonderful sunshine. And Bob was just picking. I know that. But I was mindful this morning, just getting ready, and I'm like, who came up with this plan? I asked that several times. But we had said we would be outdoors for worship today because of COVID, and so I wanted to stick to my word unless it was just absolutely miserable. And it's pretty nice. If you're cool, find a sunnier spot. You can do. Penny's quite good at that. She'll move around the house and plop down in the sunniest spot she can find. She loves that. But I was thinking this morning, with our sanctuary being built in 1919, our historic middle section of the building was 1908. They had to knock off about maybe 20% or so of the old building to be able to build for the new building. And I thought about how many people, sometimes that's awful hard to have that faith and that vision to be able to do away with what you got so you can get something a whole lot better. But during that time, in the hallway, there's a little flyer and advertises the new building, and it says that the residence for the pastor was at 1004 Spring Garden. Well, that's about where the auditorium sits, somewhere right in there. I'm sure that's part of that lot. And we know that from legend and story that the congregation was willing to worship in a tent somewhere down there in the backyard of the parsonage while they were building this new building in 1919. So for us who just out here for one day, they were willing to do it long enough for them to build this big building that we've got, this wonderful sanctuary that we'll move back toward next week, and until spring breaks we'll be in there, hopefully, if everything goes well. But the vision and insight and willingness and the leadership that the generations of this congregation have been able to make and to provide, we kind of cling on to that, especially this day. This is All Saints Sunday in the life of the church. Some churches celebrated it last Sunday, which was Reformation Sunday, and also Halloween, All Hallows Eve, and other churches are celebrating it today. I wanted to celebrate with communion, and so we're doing communion out here. So we we've moved out, and candles are going out, and we're going to relight. I'm a persistent, nothing else. But there is a connection between, and I mentioned it a little bit last week, but Halloween and All Saints Sunday, a day in which we prepare and we laugh at the scary things that go bump in the night. And the reason we can do that is because we have God, and we know God is with us and cares for us and loves us. So that makes Halloween a whole different kind of ball of wax than it is just a whole day to be afraid and scared. It's to be not even worried about what might be the possibility, because we know that God is there to care for us. But we also celebrate and remember all these saints that have come before us today. We not only remember these who have passed away, who are members of this congregation in the past year, but all those others that are in our hearts and in our minds, and we remember daily as we continue on. That's part of what we do. And part of what we do as people of faith is we continue to remind others of the light of these people in our world and in our lives. They made such a difference and an impact and touched so many folks in so many ways. And it's just amazing, partly for me to be able to know them just a little bit, in some cases, in other cases more deeply. But I've done this for several years now, just to remember a little bit of each of these people. And you can read through the list and remember them in your own way and special way and thoughts. I thought about Dennis this morning. I came through the sanctuary, and it was one Advent couple 3 years ago, back when life wasn't whatever normal is. Susan was running through a piece, and Dennis, I called him. He was semi-conducting in the pew back there, and I said, "Oh, you don't even take Sunday off?" And he's like, "No, I'm just trying to figure out how it's written in the meter." It was one of those that changed back 3 or 4 times, and those funny socks and the laughter and the smiles, and his willingness to share knowledge and love with those who came into his classrooms and into his life, to be a part of that, to share bright spot. I think of Gordon. Gordon amazed me. He always remembered my name. Even that when his memory began to fail, I would see him in the congregation and he would say, "Hey, Jason, good morning." And even when he was over at Whitestone, I'd go and he'd bring that bright smile back out and greet me in a way that a lot of folks aren't able to do, and it made me feel good to be there. Marion Smith Chamberlain, she shared with her love of music and the passion in this congregation for years, and continued to reach out and give care and love to all of her friends. Charlotte Cook, who has worked in a doctor's office, care for them, help people prepare and care for their health, and her lifelong membership in this congregation, which is a real feat in a lot of ways with people being so transient. Ella Poole Crouch, it goes without saying that I best remember Ella for the hugs. Oh my gosh. Y'all know I'm not a hugger, but I didn't go very far with Ella. She just plowed on through and just hugged anyway. And just a sweet way, in her love of family and caring for people, and sharing her love of cooking and caring and the ways that she could. I think of Ella every time I have anything to do, almost anything that I cook in the kitchen, which is not very often, but when I do, I remember Ella oftentimes, especially if I have to sift flour. She told this great story about during the war that they couldn't get wax paper. And so they used newspaper to sift the flour on and then put it into the cake. And, the persistence of folks amaze me sometimes. I would never think of that. Oh, my gosh, newspaper, it gets you black. When you read the paper, you can't do that. And so just her share of that and the wisdom that she has, the gift that she was willing to do. And Red Strader, at 104. I mean, Ella was 94 because they were 10 years apart. And Red was 104. Red was one of the guys who literally went in at D-Day. And he often told you that he was one of the guys that survived a typhoon on a boat in the Pacific during World War II. Just the gift and and he was always great. He would pull out his iPad to show me his pictures of his grandchildren and cousins and families at 102 or whatever it was. I'm like, I barely can operate my phone, and it's amazing. And to share with what he has and the neighborhood and the community to make it a better place. Halloween was kind of funny at my house. I don't usually celebrate or give out candy and all that stuff. I don't even, this year I didn't even hardly put up anything. I've got a little mom out there that's pretty decent, but this year, my neighbors, there's a couple of them, and I see them out every once in a while, and the little girl loves my golden retriever, so this little quiet knock on my front door about 5:30 on whatever Halloween day. I could barely hear it. If I'd had anything on, I wouldn't have. I opened the door, and it's the cutest little pumpkin you ever did see. And I mean, she's tiny. I had to go in there and begrudgingly give out some of my Reese's peanut butter pumpkins that I get every year. They have to last me till Christmas trees come out, which is now quicker and quicker, so that's good. I'm good. But between Christmas and Easter is always the challenge to get that far. But I can do it. Years of practice. But I gave her a couple candy, and I don't know that she even, so she's been enamored with the fact that I've kept my Christmas lights in my backyard on all year, mostly for her, because she thinks it's part of her night routine to be able to see my little lights flicker. And so not only did she tell me Happy Halloween, she told me Merry Christmas. makes it, and my neighbors across the street, they showed up in a few minutes, and they never got to the door. I just heard a bunch of coaching of them to go up to the front door. And so I look over, and there's a space guy, and there's a little kid in an outfit. I said, "Oh, look, you're a tiger." He says, "I'm not a tiger, I'm a lion." I said, "I feel right at home." But I always think Halloween's kind of fun because you can kind of be an alternate person. If you want to be a firefighter and you never had the chance, then you can get dressed up as a firefighter. You can do these things, whatever it is, and I mean, with good-hearted fun and encouragement, you can kind of experience something. And sometimes it for kids especially, it's a way to kind of test out a profession. Maybe for some of us who are older kids, we maybe should do that too. I always think of Grandma Moses. She didn't start painting till she was in her 80s. And we still talk about her in most art classes and those kind of things. Sometimes it's a little later for us to find out what we're going to be and how we're going to be it. And that takes a difference. And it's kind of this finagling and adapting and changing and learning and doing. Sometimes it's hard. It's kind of like this building. It's hard to do away with what we've got so that we can get something more. But that's partly what life calls us to do. I mean, it causes us to adapt and change. Our worship space has been down there on the lower end, but there's more sun up here. We don't have it 85 degrees, so we need to not take advantage of the shade, but bring in the sunshine so that we can experience worship here. It's kind of a learning and adapting and doing. The saints that have come before for this congregation and for our lives and the people who've touched our lives have brought brightening, have brought strength, have brought encouragement in a way that always goes deep within us and helps us to see and to do and to change and to understand. I always say almost at every funeral, probably at every funeral, there's no person that ever lives their life in a perfect way. But there is goodness somewhere in all of us. Sometimes it takes a little magnifying glass to find it. But there's goodness in this, and that's what carries on. That's what lives forward. And the best of those who've come before us are what we are called to live in our daily living. It's not just, well, they did their thing and I'm going to do mine. It's what good and what honorable and what hopeful and what trustworthy have they carried out in their life that enable me to have the courage and the strength to go forth into the world. You can look on the news, or you don't have to look very far in the news to see that there's a lot of kind of discord, there's a lot of strife, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of killing, there's a lot of violence that go on in our day-to-day lives, in the world around us. I mean, I just kind of shake my head and I'm like, where do they come up with these ideas of the next hateful thing to do for somebody else, against somebody else? I don't understand it. But I know that we're called as people of faith to go into the world, to not build ourselves into some silo or behind some massive fortress wall, but to go forth into the world, bravely going forth into the world, because we too have understood and we understand that story from Revelation, that story from faith, that story from Scripture of the hope and the goodness that God offers to us and to the world. Sometimes it'll get you down if you keep listening to the news. Talking heads, the 24-hour news cycle, in my opinion, could go away. Let's go back to 6 to 7 at night. That's enough. Let's focus on some goodness in our world and the goodness that we can do to make a difference. I always think of the saints that have come onto the church, and people are like, well, these saints are gone. And I'm like, yeah, no, these saints are still with us in the great communion, the cloud of witnesses. But the other thing is that these saints sometimes just kind of slide out of the way a little bit so that we can be the saints, so that we can become saints, that we can become living saints in the people of God. Church in Richmond I used to go to, on Sunday morning, the preacher would always start out the service, and I always thought it was a little hokey, but I think I like it sometimes too. He'd say, "Good morning, saints," and he'd wait for you to say good morning back, and then he'd say, "Good morning, sinners," and he wanted the saints and the sinners to be the same volume. that reminder of that. But it enables us and empowers us to be the saints of God into the world that's hurting and struggling. And that we let light, regardless of how bad the wind gets, continue to burn and to shine out in the world. As people of faith, that's what we're called to do. To offer the Jesus that loves us and cares for us and offers us grace to the world around us. To live our faith boldly and to go into the world with the trust and hope and care of Christ. Our glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.